Algebra Unit 9, Lesson 1, Notes 1, Square and Cube Roots. A square root is a number that is multiplied by itself to form a product. Its symbol is called a radical. Squaring and square rooting are inverse operations. Non-real roots are when there is a negative sign underneath the radical. If the same number is being multiplied by itself, then the result will always be positive, not negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So 5 squared is really 5 times 5, which is 25. Negative 5 squared is negative 5 times negative 5, which is also 25. Therefore, square rooting 25, your answer could be both positive 5 and negative 5. You can write this as two different answers, or you can also write it using this notation, which really just means plus or minus 5. Simplify. Indicate if there are non-real roots, so if there's a negative under the radical. Round to the nearest tenth if necessary. So letter A is read either square root of 36 or radical 36. So think to yourself, what number times itself gives you 36? Well, 6 times 6 gives you 36, and negative 6 times negative 6 gives you 36. So the answer here would be plus or minus 6. Letter B, negative square root of 64. This is really like saying negative 1 times square root of 64. Okay? Well, the square root of 64 is either 8 or negative 8. So 8 or negative 8. And when we're multiplying that by negative 1, we get the same result. So plus or minus 8. Letter C, square root of 144 over 4. When you have fractions, take the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. So the square root of the top is plus or minus 12, and the square root of the bottom is plus or minus 2. So plus or minus 12 over plus or minus 2. You can reduce that. Your answer would end up being positive or negative 6. Letter D, 6 times square root of 49 is 6 times square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. 6 times 7 is 42. So this would be plus or minus 42. Okay, let's take a look at letter F real quick. Oops. Square root of negative 16. What times itself gives you negative 16? The answer is nothing. We have no real roots. So we will simply write no real roots. You can't have a negative under the radical sign. If you were to type that into your calculator, your graphing calculator, square root of negative 16, it would come up non-real roots or non-real, something to that effect. You can do the other 3 on your own. Let's talk about cube roots. A cube root is a number that is multiplied by itself 3 times to form a product. Cubing and cube rooting are inverse operations. 2 to the third power, which is 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. Therefore, the cube root of 8, what times itself 3 times gives you 8, is 2. Let's take a look at this next one. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Well, negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. And then positive 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So you can actually take the cube root of negative numbers. Your result would end up in a negative answer. I know these are cube roots because they have that little 3 up there, okay? So those would signify a cube root. A square root is standard, so we don't write a little 2. It would just, you know, if you look at the difference, these have a little 3, the other ones just have nothing. Simplify, round to the nearest tenth if necessary. Cube root of 27. These also can be done on your calculator. If you go to the math feature, the math button, I believe under number, you'll see square root and cube root as well. What times itself 3 times gives you 27? That would be 3. Okay, 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. Letter B, cube root of negative 125. What times itself 3 times gives you negative 125. Again, you can plug it into your calculator, go to the math number, and it should be there. Actually, looking at the calculator, all you have to do is hit the math button, and it's option 4. So I take that back. I know I said that incorrectly before. Go to the math key, which is under your alpha key on the left towards the top. And then it is option 4. And then you just type in negative 125 and you get negative 5. Letter C, same as square roots, you want to take the cube root of the numerator, and the cube root of the denominator. So here we're taking the cube root of 729 over the cube root of 64. Do them separately. The cube root of 729, so math on your calculator, option 4. The cube root of 729 is 9. And the cube root of 64 is 4. So you have 9 over 4. It does say to round to the nearest tenth, so go ahead and divide. 9 divided by 4. We get 2.25. But to the nearest tenth, it's 2.3. And we'll do one more together. Let's look at letter D. Letter D is 10 times the cube root of 64. Well, I just did the cube root of 64. That was 4. So this is really 10 times 4, or 40. You can go ahead and finish E through H on your own. You know that square root of 8 is not a whole number because 8 is not a perfect square. The number line below shows that square root of 8 is between 2 and 3. Since 8 is closer to 9 than 4, the best whole number estimate for square root of 8 is 3. So determine which 2 consecutive integers that follow the following roots fall. Then determine without a calculator which integer the root is closest to. So it's good to know your perfect squares to do this. So in the margin, either on the side or up top, write your perfect squares. 1 times 1 is 1. 1's a perfect square. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16, and so on. So 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100. We'll do some more here. 121, 144, 169, 14 times 14 is 196. I like to go to 15, which is 225. Okay? So, determine between which 2 consecutive integers it falls. So you want to look at your perfect squares here. I have square root of 83. It falls in between 81 and 100. So if I were to jot a number line here, here's square root of 81, which is 9. Here's square root of 100, which is 10. 83 is closer to 81 than it is to 100. This is where square root of 83 would lie, roughly. So which two consecutive integers? Well, it's between 9 and 10. And which integer is the root closest to? Well, if you look at the number line, it's definitely closest to 9 than 10. So it's closer to 9. And I'm just going to circle that to show that it's closer to 9. Let's do a cube root one. Let's take a look at letter D. Letter D is a decimal. Oh, that's not a cube root. Let's move to, we'll do letter I. I is a decimal cube root. For this one, you want a list of cube roots, so maybe on the other side, write some cube roots. I'm just going to write them off to the side here. So 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. 3 cubed is 27. 4 cubed is 64. I want to go to at least 129 here in this example. So 5 cubed is 125, and you can always find these out just by plugging them in your calculator. 6 cubed is 216, and looks like I'm going to stop right there. So again, if I were to follow my number line method here, 129 falls somewhere in here. So I have cube root of 125, and the next one is cube root of 216. And I know the integers were 5 and 6. Cube root of 129.6 lies somewhere on this side. So the integers would be 5 and 6, with it closest to number 5. It's important to remember that there are two answers to every square root, positive and negative. The principal square root refers to the non-negative square root of a number. For example, square root of 36 has two answers. It has 6 and negative 6, which we know can be combined into plus or minus 6. But the principal square root is the positive. That's the principal. I'll just put PR for principal here. Okay. So let's take a look at some equations. Solve the following equations and indicate if there are non-real roots. We'll do a couple of these. We'll do a square root one and a cube root one. Remember, non-real roots, that's when you have a negative under a square root sign, not under a cube root sign. Letter A. We'll start off nice and easy. We have x squared equals 81. Well, if squaring and square rooting are inverse operations, and to solve equations we have to do inverse operations, what I'm going to do here is square root both sides. What happens is that frees up x to be by itself, and then I have square root of 81. Again, you can plug it right in your calculator. There's a square root button right above the x squared, or you can go to the math feature and it's in there on your calculator as well. So x equals square root of 81 is positive 9 or negative 9, and I'm going to show that with plus or minus 9. Let's look at letter C. This time we have a to the third power. So negative 125 equals a to the third, or a cubed. Remember, the inverse operation for cube is cube root. So on both sides here, I'm going to cube root. That frees up a to be by itself. And if we did the cube root of negative 125, we would end up with negative 5. There's no plus or minus. It's not a square root. So square roots have two answers or non-real roots, and a cube root is either positive or negative. Go ahead and try the other two on your own. The equations on this page are multiple steps. You're going to solve them just like you would solve a normal equation, but then your last step, you're either going to cube root or square root, okay? I'll do an easy one, and then we'll go into one or two that are a little more tricky. So letter E, I need to get B by itself. The first thing I need to do is get rid of that 7. So just like a normal equation, I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. I'm left with B squared equals 4. To get rid of a square, I square root. Remember, square roots have both positive and negative roots, so my answer is plus or minus 2. Let's take a look at, we'll jump to H. Now here I have like terms. So I'm going to combine those before I do anything. 7w squared minus 2w squared is 5w squared. Bring down the plus 10, and this equals 90. Just like a normal equation, I'm first going to get rid of my addition by subtracting 10. 5w squared equals 80. Divide by 5 to get that w by itself, and we get 16. To get rid of a square, we square root. Remember, square roots have both positive and negative, so plus or minus 4. Let's look at letter J. So take a look at this equation. You have dealt with equations, solved equations that were just as complicated, just maybe a single variable, okay? The first thing I would do is distribute that negative 3. Negative 3 times 4p to the third is negative 12p to the third. Negative 3 times 11 is negative 33. Bring down the minus 2p to the third, and that equals 345. I'm going to go right ahead and combine like terms. Negative 12 and negative 2 make negative 14, and the variable and exponent remain the same because I'm just combining. Bring down the minus 33 equals 345. Add 33 to both sides. Negative 14 p to the third equals 378. Divide by negative 14. P to the third equals negative 27. This time we have a cube, so to get rid of a cube, we cube root. You can go ahead and plug it into your calculator if you're not sure what it is in your head. But the cube root of negative 27 is negative 3. So this one only has one solution. Let me make this smaller so you can see the whole thing. And there it is. I feel confident that you could finish the rest of this page. Let's take a look at that next page. Okay, let's do one with variables on both sides. That's what K and L are like. So I'll do the one with fractions with you. Don't get scared away by L, just distribute, combine like terms, and solve with variables on each side, okay? This one here, I like to get my variables on one side, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract the 1/4 k squared. It doesn't matter which one you choose to get rid of. I just chose the 1/4. Okay. I like to usually get rid of the smaller one, and 1/4 is in fact smaller than 3/8. You can use your calculator to subtract those fractions. Make sure you use parentheses to force the operations, but you can type in 3/8 minus 1/4. Hit the math frac button, and it would give you the reduced fraction of 1/8. And then bring down your k squared minus 8. Add 8. We have 18 equals 1/8 k squared. We have to get rid of that 1/8. We could divide by 1/8, or the shortcut is to multiply by the reciprocal, which is 8 over 1. When you multiply, you get 144 equals k squared. Square root plus or minus 12 equals k. So if I were to plug in positive 12, it would work. If I were to plug in negative 12, the equation would work. Okay. So again, on letter L, you want to start by distributing, okay? And then once you distribute, you'll have some like terms to combine and potentially get rid of here, okay? So you'll see what happens there. Letter M, it's just a couple distributing. You'll be fine. Make sure you distribute that -3, okay? And letter N is a good multiple choice question. Just give it a try, see what you can come of it.